Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Thursday, 17th July 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China faces a complex economic and political landscape, with its Commerce Minister Wang Wentao seeking to restore healthy trade relations, with the U.S. emphasizing the importance of both nations as economic partners. However, American companies in China report record low investment plans and declining confidence due to uncertainty in U.S.-China relations and past U.S. policies. A U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee report accuses China of expanding global influence by exploiting past U.S. policies. The U.S. government is expected to allow Nvidia to resume shipping its H20 AI chips to China, despite state media warnings of a potential AI computing power glut, and restrictions on exports of 8 key EV battery technologies have taken effect. Internally, China grapples with economic issues, with economists urging pro-market reforms to address imbalances. A new report reveals a decline in a key marketization index. The country anticipates a challenging job market as a record number of graduates enter the workforce, despite recent easing of youth unemployment rates. The top anti-corruption watchdog is scrutinizing funding for scientific research to bolster high-tech development. Technologically, China has surpassed the U.S. in controlling the rare earth minerals market, crucial for electronics and EVs. Its renewable energy revolution stems from decades of strategic state planning and investment. China has unveiled a tail-sitter drone for disaster rescue, sent a mini-brain chip to its Tiangong space station, and its supercharged rail system has reached speeds of 600 km/h. Legally, Chen Feng, former chairman of Anne Group Company, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. A contest for licenses to issue stablecoins in Hong Kong has impacted China's stock market. Turning to Japan, the government has expressed concern that the arrest and prosecution of Japanese citizens in China is causing public anxiety and deterring travel, following the sentencing of an Astellas Pharma employee to 3 years and 6 months for espionage. In the United States, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said the Trump administration aimed to make Chinese developers addicted to American technology, leading to discussions of a grand bargain with China after a shift on Nvidia. President Donald Trump canceled $4 billion in federal funding for California's high-speed railway project after China announced its supercharged rail system had reached high speeds. Israel's military actions continue to draw international condemnation. An Israeli shell struck Gaza cities only Catholic Church, killing 3 and injuring 10, including the priest. Pope Leo XIV has renewed calls for a ceasefire. An Israeli airstrike also damaged Syria's defense ministry headquarters in Damascus, actions the U.S. does not support. Israel claims these strikes defend the Druze minority. Syria is facing internal strife alongside external attacks. Fighting between Bedouin tribes and local fighters in Svyrydenko has caused dozens of deaths. An Israeli airstrike hit the outskirts of Svyrydenko amidst these clashes. Syrian leader Ahmed al-Sharaa has vowed to protect the Druze population. The United States has voiced its disapproval of Israel's strikes in Syria. The U.S. Senate approved cuts to funding for public media and foreign aid. President Trump has attacked Fed Chair Powell over interest rates. Australia's federal court dismissed a pro-Israel group's application to refer 9 entertainment staff for contempt over the Antoinette Lattouf case. Australia's political scene saw Labour leader Dean Winter reaffirming his party's backing for the controversial Macquarie Point AFL Stadium for the Tasmania Devils, despite the state's current financial difficulties. In a somber legal development, Lachlan Young admitted guilt to the murder of his former partner, Hannah Maguire, 8 days into his trial, after initially pleading guilty to manslaughter. Further, Naha al-Masri, a 61-year-old Palestinian woman who fled Gaza, was released from immigration detention in Sydney, following intervention from Assistant Minister Julian Hill. Turning to the United States, nationwide marches and rallies are being held to protest the Trump administration and honor the legacy of the late Congressman John Lewis. Donald Trump criticized supporters who questioned the transparency of a government inquiry into Jeffrey Epstein, while also seeking the release of grand jury transcripts. Attorney General Pam Bondi toured Alcatraz prison. The U.S. House sent the Crypto Genius Act to Trump. The U.S. designated the group accused of the Pahalgam attack as a terrorist organization. The U.S. plans to construct new naval facilities in the western Philippines and is also cracking down on Chinese goods disguised as products from Southeast Asia. The U.S.-China trade deal is expected to resemble the Phase 1 agreement from Trump's first term, with fentanyl trafficking being a key topic. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang called the Chinese brain drain a great loss for the U.S. Shifting focus to China, the U.S. is increasing its efforts to curb the flow of Chinese goods disguised as products from Southeast Asian countries. Fentanyl trafficking, a key point in prior trade disputes, is expected to be a central topic in future U.S.-China trade discussions. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang also commented on the departure of Chinese talent from the U.S., viewing it as a substantial loss for the latter. In Ukraine, Yulia Svyrydenko, previously involved in finalizing a minerals agreement with the U.S., has been appointed as the nation's new prime minister. Meanwhile, in Eswatini, 5 immigrants deported from the United States are reportedly imprisoned and held in solitary confinement. Nauru is positioned to gain significant financial benefits by supporting the U.S. approach to deep-sea mining. In the Philippines, the U.S. is planning to build new naval facilities in the western part of the country, potentially strengthening Manila's capacity to challenge Chinese vessels in the South China Sea. Finally, in India, Air India reported no issues with fuel switches on their other Boeing planes, following a fatal crash last month. However, a U.S. report suggests investigators are focusing on the actions of the plane's captain. Ukraine is focusing on bolstering domestic weapons production and ensuring economic stability. Yulia Svyrydenko has been appointed as the new prime minister, the first leadership change since Russia's invasion in 2022. A cabinet reshuffle aims to increase war spending and strengthen international relations. Drones have played a crucial role in repelling the Russian invasion, and President Zelensky and former President Trump are reportedly considering a large-scale drone deal. The Russian Defense Ministry has reported that Ukrainian drones are targeting Moscow and other regions. Preparations are being made to deliver Patriot missile systems to Ukraine. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko maintains that Putin only responds to displays of strength. Turning to the United Kingdom, efforts are underway to lower the voting age to 16 for all UK elections, with the goal of implementation by the next general election. A coalition of environmental and heritage organisations has launched a £1 billion initiative focused on integrating nature into urban environment. The UK's steadfast support for Ukraine and its commitment to European security have enhanced its international reputation. Prime Minister Keir Starmer asserts that a plan is in place in the event of a ceasefire in Ukraine once Russia's Putin agrees to an unconditional truce. Keir Starmer and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz are formalizing a treaty designed to strengthen defense ties and combat migrant smuggling across the English Channel. In Germany, Chancellor Friedrich Merz is championing a strategic alliance between the UK, France and Germany to tackle illegal migration and bolster defense cooperation. As mentioned, Metz and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer are also signing a treaty to strengthen defense ties and combat migrant smuggling across the English Channel. Regarding Afghanistan, an email has been circulated informing citizens that some of their personal data may have been compromised. Finally, in Russia, the Defense Ministry has reported that Ukrainian drones are targeting Moscow and other Russian regions. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva gained popularity by opposing U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats, denouncing them as blackmail. He asserted he wouldn't take orders from any foreign leader. He stated he wasn't elected to be the emperor of the world. The lower house passed a controversial bill overhauling environmental legislation. Over 350 organizations criticized it as a devastation bill. Brazil's rare earth exports to China tripled in the first half of 2025. This aligns with increased Chinese imports and raises concerns about supply chain shift. Japan faces a complex economic landscape, with Fukoku Life increasing its purchases of Japanese government bonds due to fears of looser fiscal policy following potential shifts in the ruling coalition. Socially, the nation confronts a stark demographic reality, recording fewer than 700,000 births last year, a historic low, prompting political parties to promise new support measures. Economically, Japan's trade deficit reached 2.2 trillion yen, $15 billion, in the first half of the year, intensified by concerns about continued U.S. tariffs, a situation that has led to pessimism among Hiroshima residents. Couchstarts failed $47 bid to acquire 7, and that has sparked debate about foreign acquisitions in a changing corporate environment. Meanwhile, Sega is expanding its presence by launching its first Japan store in Shibuya Parko, and a temple in southwestern Japan is under scrutiny for charging admission fees exclusively to foreign tourists. Russia's military operations in Ukraine are intensifying, with claims of village seizures across multiple front lines. These advances persist despite the United States urging for de-escalation. Russia interprets the U.S. considering expanded arms shipments to Ukraine, particularly a speculated drone agreement between Ukrainian and American political figures, as discouraging Kyiv from pursuing peaceful resolutions. Slovakia, having initially stalled the 18th EU sanctions package against Russia, has now approved it, resolving prior reservations regarding Russian gas dependency. Globally, anxieties are growing about the security of undersea cables, which handle the vast majority of international data. Recent incidents in the Baltic Sea and near Taiwan have heightened concerns that critical communication infrastructure is vulnerable to potential attacks, possibly state-sponsored by nations such as Russia and China. Syria is grappling with escalating sectarian violence in Svyrydenko province, resulting in hundreds of deaths. A surgeon at Sweden National Hospital described the grim situation, citing numerous gunshot wounds and execution-style headshots among the at least 200 fatalities. Despite this violence, the Syrian government and Druze minority leaders announced a new ceasefire agreement, though a previous attempt on July 15 failed, and prominent Druze leader Sheikh Hikmat al-Hydri has already disavowed the latest agreement. Residents are now assessing the damage, including widespread looting and arson. Further inflaming tensions, Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa strongly condemned recent Israeli airstrikes on Damascus, suggesting they could exacerbate sectarian tension. The nation also faces economic pressures, with approximately $20 in foreign investment dependent on a peace agreement between President al-Sharaa and Israel, according to Middle East experts. India witnessed advancements for its EB-5 and EB-3 visa applicants, as indicated in the August 25 U.S. visa bulletin, though family-based categories remain static. India's Ministry of External Affairs expressed concern over perceived double standards in the context of Russian oil purchases. The Public Accounts Committee, PAC, called for a review of Aadhaar, focusing on biometric verification failures, addressing international trade dynamics. The Ministry of External Affairs responded to a U.S. Congress bill proposing a 500% duty on nations, including India, buying Russian oil. In business developments, Tesla inaugurated its first store in India, and Starlink received its final regulatory approval, enabling the rollout of its services. Shifting to international relations, NATO's chief cautioned India, China, and Brazil, all major buyers of Russian goods. This follows India's response, through its Ministry of External Affairs, to a U.S. Congress bill that proposes a 500% duty on countries purchasing Russian oil, underscoring global tensions regarding energy commerce and sanctions linked to Russia. Turning to Singapore, a former policeman of Indian descent was sentenced to jail for his role in the death of his domestic helper. District Judge Teo A.I. Lin emphasized the policeman's failure to act while the helper was abused by his wife and mother-in-law. This incident does not meet the criteria for inclusion. It involves an individual and lacks significant geopolitical, economic, or policy impact. Therefore, it will not be summarized. Malaysia is currently facing scrutiny over the appointment of Wan Ahmad Farid Wan Saleh as the new Chief Justice, a decision that has ignited debate due to his prior political ties with former Prime Minister Najib Razak, raising concerns about judicial impartiality. Adding to the country's challenges, public confidence in Prime Minister Anwar's administration seems to be waning, reflected in a recent march organized by Malaysian lawyers. In Kelantan, authorities apprehended more than 20 men in a raid on a private residence suspected of hosting a gay party, where law enforcement officials found condoms and HIV medication. Meanwhile, in Selangor, 6 people were taken into custody for alleged indecent conduct during a contentious marriage enrichment program, with the Selangor police chief verifying that nudity occurred involving both instructors and participants. El Salvador is now witnessing the exile of Cristosal, a prominent human rights organization. This action was prompted by escalating threats and harassment attributed to President Nayib Bukele's government. Cristosal had been actively investigating prison deaths and allegations of torture occurring under Bukele's administration. This scrutiny led to increased pressure on the organization, manifested through direct threats, surveillance targeting its employees, and the arrest of Ruth Lopez, the anti-corruption director, in May. The severity of these conditions forced Cristosal to evacuate its entire staff from El Salvador, effectively ceasing its operations within the country. France concluded its 65-year military presence in Senegal by handing over its 2 remaining military bases. In other news, a towering mural depicting the Statue of Liberty, covering her eyes, interpreted as a critique of U.S. President Donald Trump's immigration and deportation policies, has gained significant online attention. Furthermore, a stage play based on the trial of the men who drugged and raped Gisèle Pellicot will be staged in Avignon, France, exploring the lessons for society from the country's biggest ever rape trial. Shifting gears to sports, Tadej Pogacar secured a stage victory in the Pyrenees and reclaimed the Tour de France yellow jersey. The Philippines joined Australia and the United States in Australia's largest bilateral military exercises, signaling strengthened regional defense ties. Rice consumption in the Philippines has become a concern, as it makes up 50% of the average Filipino meal. Following controversy, Helisaf, a Canadian travel insurance comparison firm, apologized for and retracted a ranking that inaccurately labeled the Philippines as the least safe country for travel. In Iraq, a devastating fire erupted at a recently inaugurated shopping mall in Kut, claiming the lives of at least 61 people. Initial reports indicate that an exploding air conditioning unit ignited the blaze. Tragically, many victims succumbed to smoke inhalation while seeking refuge in bathrooms or became trapped in a lift. Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani has instructed the Interior Minister to conduct a thorough investigation into the cause of the fire and to establish preventative protocols to avoid similar tragedies in the future. Local authorities have cited substandard construction practices and inadequate emergency preparedness as contributing factors to the high number of fatalities. Pakistan is grappling with the devastating impact of heavy monsoon rains. At least 178 individuals have tragically lost their lives due to the severe flooding and related incidents. A particularly grim 24-hour period saw 54 deaths in Punjab province, followed by 63 fatalities in another day. The relentless downpour has destroyed countless homes, and the Meteorological Department forecasts continued rainfall in Islamabad, Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and surrounding areas. Sudan faces a dire health crisis as childhood vaccination rates have collapsed to a mere 48% in 2024, a drastic fall from over 90% in 2022. The World Health Organization reports, leaving children acutely susceptible to infectious diseases amid ongoing humanitarian challenges. Shifting focus to South Sudan, the president is appealing for renewed dialogue to prevent a descent into civil war, though the opposition party is demanding the release of its members before any further peace talks can proceed. South Korea is grappling with the aftermath of severe downpours. These rains have tragically claimed at least 4 lives. Over 1,300 people have been forced to evacuate their homes. A particularly poignant incident involved a man in Seosan, South Chungcheong province. He drowned in his car after alerting his wife to the flooding. Meanwhile, in the legal arena, Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Jae-yong secured a significant victory. The Supreme Court affirmed his acquittal on financial criminal charges related to a 2015 merger. Singapore is seeing its restaurateurs expand into Malaysia, motivated by high rents, labor shortages, and dampened consumer spending. Mr. Biryani owner Govinda Rajan plans to open a location in Johor Bahru, Malaysia, exemplifying this movement. Simultaneously, the Indian Navy's Eastern Fleet ships arrived in Singapore, reinforcing the long-standing naval relationship with the Republic of Singapore Navy, RSN. For over 3 decades, the Indian Navy and RSN have cultivated operational relations, highlighting the strategic significance of this alliance in Southeast Asia. Spain is grappling with a severe wildfire near Madrid, causing significant smoke pollution in the capital. Simultaneously, authorities are actively searching for missing American hiker Cole Henderson in the Pyrenees Mountains after he was last heard from on July 9. Over in Ibiza, emergency services are strained by a surge in drug-related ambulance calls from nightclubs, intensifying debates about the impacts of tourism. The United Kingdom has formalized a deep alliance with Germany through a newly signed friendship treaty. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer signed the agreement, solidifying cooperation across mutual defense, energy, economic collaboration, and migration. The Mutual Defense Pact is a key element responding to escalating global instability. The nations will also work together to tackle irregular migration. To improve infrastructure, the treaty outlines plans for a new direct rail connection between the UK and Germany. Indonesia is currently facing a complex set of socioeconomic pressures. The country is struggling to generate sufficient employment for its 44 million young people, fostering a sense of economic unease within this demographic relative to their peers in neighboring countries. Concurrently, Indonesia is dealing with an influx of affordable Chinese products, which is causing trade deficits and broader economic anxieties. Separately, Bali is seeing an increase in crimes committed by foreign nationals, prompting fears that the island could become a hotspot for drug smuggling and other illicit activity. Togo's recent municipal elections, considered a crucial gauge of public sentiment towards President Faure Gnassingbé, saw a disappointing voter turnout, especially in Lomé, where security was notably heightened. The elections took place against a backdrop of unusual public demonstrations challenging proposed constitutional changes, which critics fear could prolong Gnassingbé's tenure without defined limits. Myanmar faces allegations that a Chinese firm is providing the ruling junta with bombs. These bombs are reportedly being used against both rebel forces and civilian populations. Meanwhile, in China, police are actively investigating cases of missing teenagers. These teens are suspected of being trafficked to scam centers, with some investigations pointing towards connections with Myanmar. The disappearance of a student after traveling to Yunnan province bordering Myanmar has heightened concerns about the region's involvement in these illicit operations. Canada is grappling with concerns over rising interest rates, as the Bank of Canada held its key rate steady at 5%, but cautioned that further increases might be necessary to combat persistent inflation. The central bank noted that while inflation has eased, underlying price pressures remain a concern, impacting household finances and business investments. Transitioning to the United States, the Biden administration is facing renewed scrutiny over its immigration policies as border crossings continue to surge, particularly in states like Texas and Arizona. The administration is implementing stricter enforcement measures while also seeking to expand legal pathways for immigration, a strategy that has drawn criticism from both sides of the political spectrum. Across the Atlantic, the United Kingdom is navigating a complex economic landscape with ongoing debates about tax cuts and public spending. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is under pressure to stimulate economic growth, while also addressing concerns about rising inflation and the cost of living crisis, particularly as the country heads towards a general election. Shifting focus to France, President Emmanuel Macron is facing challenges related to pension reforms and social unrest. The controversial decision to raise the retirement age has triggered widespread protests and strikes, highlighting deep divisions within French society and posing a significant test to Macron's leadership. In Germany, the coalition government is working to address energy security concerns amidst ongoing geopolitical tensions. Chancellor Olaf Scholz is seeking to diversify energy sources and reduce reliance on Russian gas, while also balancing environmental goals and the needs of German industry. Moving to Australia, the government is pushing forward with its plans for an Indigenous voice to Parliament, a proposed advisory body that would give Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people a greater say on policies that affect their lives. The initiative has generated considerable debate, with supporters arguing it will promote reconciliation and address historical injustices, while opponents raise concerns about its potential impact on national unity. New Zealand's Substack, co-founded by Kiwi Hamish Mackenzie, has secured $168 in funding, boosting the company's valuation to $1.80 billion, with backing from a New Zealand venture capital firm. Meanwhile, Napier Deputy Mayor Annette Brosnan was honored with a Superhuman Award at the local Government New Zealand event as she prepares to leave her role. Mexico City officials are responding to growing concerns about gentrification. Their plan aims to address the negative impacts of mass tourism, which has sparked protests from local residents. Despite former U.S. President Trump's prior announcement about Coca-Cola production using cane sugar in the U.S., Mexican heritage individuals in Mexico expressed divergent sentiments regarding the matter. The United States is intensifying its immigration and deportation enforcement. This has a growing impact on Marshallese and Micronesian communities. The U.S. plans to refocus the G20 on its original financial objectives. The U.S. will take over the G20 presidency in the coming year, Slovenia has barred far-right Israeli cabinet ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich from entering the country after the EU ministers failed to agree on joint action concerning Israel. The French army is withdrawing from Senegal, ending its military presence in West Africa amidst a growing jihadist conflict threatening the Gulf of Guinea nations. British media reported a significant data leak compromising the identities of UK spies and special forces operating in Afghanistan. A U.S. Congressional Committee head cautioned Panama about increasing Chinese influence over the Panama Canal, citing concerns over Chinese state-owned companies bidding for port concessions. Prince Harry retraced his mother, Princess Diana's 1997 walk through a minefield in Quito, Cuernavaca, Angola, highlighting renewed concerns about land mine usage. Turning to Nigeria, the garrison town of Monguno remains largely secure due to its defenses, despite a recent increase in jihadist attacks in the region. In Kenya, some anti-government protesters in Nairobi attributed their disorientation near the presidential residence to an evil spell favoring President William Ruto. Meanwhile, in Bangladesh, forces clashed with supporters of ousted leader Sheikh Hasina, resulting in at least 4 deaths. Pro-Hasina activists, armed with sticks, attacked police and set vehicles on fire during a student party event. Saudi Arabia and Qatar will host Asia qualifiers for the 2026 World Cup, with Qatar hosting Group A in October. Focusing on Oceania, Tonga's health system has been fully restored after a cyber attack, aided by Australia. Separately, 3 people were rescued from a life raft after their vessel failed en route to Tonga, with an NSDF fight aircraft assisting in the rescue. In Europe, a teacher was stabbed during a school musical performance in Alblasserdam, Netherlands, leading to 3 arrests. The Tomorrowland Music Festival in Belgium will proceed as scheduled despite a fire that destroyed its main stage. Finally, 5 people were charged in Greece in connection to the killing of UC Berkeley professor Przemysław Jedzioski, including his ex-wife. Jedzioski, who taught quantitative marketing, was shot several times outside Athens. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.